Hi class, welcome to our next video lesson on 6-5. We're talking about the quadratic formula today. This is a lesson that you may have been introduced to before. Hopefully this is a review lesson for most of you. If you have not been introduced to this before, make sure you pay very close attention. This is a great formula to help us solve for the roots of a quadratic equation, which means find where it crosses the x-axis at. Very, very helpful. So the quadratic formula is this right here. It's a negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All we need to do, class, is put in the proper numbers for these letters. And as long as we simplify this formula correctly, we're going to get what x equals, which is where it crosses the x-axis. Or what else that means is we could find the number that satisfies the equation, which makes the left side equal to the right side. So when we do this, we first have to get it into standard form. So let's get a 0 onto the a 0 off to the right side. So we got to subtract 28 from both sides. So put this in descending order. It's x squared minus 12x minus 28 equals a 0. So now, class, as you know, our a term is in front of x squared, our b term is in front of x, and our c term is our constant. So I always like to put these off to the side so I can always refer back to them. Our a term is 1, our b term is a negative 12, and our c term is a negative 28. So I would always write those down so then I could easily put these into my formula. So once I have my a, b, and c, I just simply use my formula. X equals a negative 12, or a negative b, which is a negative 12. So a positive 12 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so a negative 12 squared, a negative 12 times negative 12 is a positive 144. Minus 4 times a is 1, times c is a negative 28, all over 2 times a, so 2 times 1. So all I did, class, was I put in these numbers into this equation. And that's how I got this red line right there. Now we're just going to simplify everything on the right side of this equal sign. So I would have your calculator out for this lesson. You're going to use it quite frequently. I always like to multiply these three by each other first. So it's a negative 4 multiplied by 1 multiplied by a negative 28. When I multiply those three, I get a positive 112. So now I get 12 plus and minus the square root of 144 plus 112. All of that divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. Continuing to simplify the radical, I'm going to add these two together. So 144 plus 112 is 256. So I get 12 plus or minus the square root of 256, all of that divided by 2. So the square root of 256 is 16. So as I continue simplifying, 12 plus or minus the square root, the square root of 256, which is 16, all of that divided by 2. So we get two answers. 12 plus 16 divided by 2. 12 plus 16 is 28. 28 divided by 2 is x equals 14. There's one of our answers. And the other answer is 12 minus 16 divided by 2. 12 minus 16 is a negative 4. A negative 4 divided by 2 is a negative 2. And there's our two answers. X equals 14 and x equals a negative 2. It really works out nice when you have this formula to follow and all you do is simplify everything in the formula until finally you get what x equals. X equals 14, x equals a negative 2. You guys pause the video and try number 2 on your own, please. Okay, you should have added or subtracted 33 to get x squared minus 8x minus 33 equals a 0. So now our a value, our b value, and our c value are 1, negative 8, and a negative 33. So let's put the rest of the stuff in our equation. X equals a negative 8, positive 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 64, minus 4 times a times c all over 2a, 2 times 1. So in our parentheses here, or in our radical, we get a negative 4 times 1 times a negative 33, which is 132, and then, or positive 132, and so it's 64 plus 132. Plus 64 in the parentheses, we should have got 196. So 8 plus or minus the square root of 196, all of that divided by 2 is what x equals. The square root of 196 is 14. So it's 8 plus 14 divided by 2, and it's 8 minus 14 divided by 2. 8 plus 14 is 22. 22 divided by 2, x equals 11. That should have been one of your answers, and the other answer, 8 minus 14 is a negative 6. A negative 6 divided by 2 is a negative 3. So our two answers are x equals 11 and x equals a negative 3. If we go back up to our graph, again, this is what satisfies the equation, so you can check your work by putting 11 and negative 3 into here, and you're going to get 33 on the left side equals 33 on the right side. Also, you're going to get the x-axis, the roots. Notice how it crosses at a negative 3 on our x-axis, and it crosses at a positive 11. I forgot to do that on our last example. On problem number 1, it crossed at 14 and a negative 2. So if you were to graph this on our graphing calculator, you would see this graph. There's our x-axis of a negative 2. There's our other x-intercept at a positive 14. Going on to problem number 3, if we look at this one, we kind of have a unique graph on this one. Let's first just solve using the quadratic formula. So A equals 1 again, B equals 22, and C equals 121. So x equals a negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared, 22 squared, which is 484, minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. 2 times 1 is 2. So now we're going to multiply these three numbers by each other. A negative 4 times 1 times 121 is a negative 484. So negative 22 plus or minus the square root of 484 and a negative 484. All of that divided by 2. Notice what happens to your radical. 484 minus 484 is 0. And the square root of 0 is just 0. So this is now gone. We don't have any more radical. And it's just a negative 22 divided by 2. That's what x equals. So x equals a negative 11. Now, all of these are quadratics. They have a square term, so they're parabolas, which means they have two roots. So if all I get is x equals a negative 11, that must mean x equals a negative 11 is a double root. What happens at a double root? Remember, class, I need to see this dr right there. You need to tell me that this is a double root. And a double root means it doesn't cross the x-axis. The graph just touches the x-axis at negative 11. So there it is. Here's our x-axis. It hits at a negative 11. Number 4. I want you guys to pause the video for number 4 and try this one on your own. So you should have got A to be a 2, B to be 4, and C to equal a negative 5. So we have x equals a negative b. So we have a negative 4 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. 2 times 2, which is 4. The quadratic formula and completing the square, they both get you the same result in solving for x or finding the roots of the equation. What's really nice about the quadratic formula is even if there's a coefficient in front of your x squared term that's a number other than 1, for completing the square it makes it more difficult to do. For the quadratic formula, it really is no difference. Instead of putting 1 in, you put a 2 in for a, or whatever the coefficient is. It really doesn't make the problem any more difficult. So that's kind of nice. Let's simplify our radical. So x equals a negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16, and we have a negative 4 times 2 times a negative 5 is the answer of 40. So 16 and now a positive 40. All of that divided by 4. 16 plus 40 is 56. So now we have x equals a negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 56 divided by 4. The square root of 56 breaks down into 4 times 14. So we could simplify the radical to make it 2 square root 14. So now our answer, x equals a negative 4 plus or minus 2 square root 14 divided by 4. And now, class, make sure that you reduce whenever you can. I obviously can't combine negative 4 plus 2 square root 14, so I'm not going to do that. But I could take a 2 out of all of these coefficients. So my answer is x equals a negative 2 plus or minus 1 square root 14, or square root 14 divided by 2. So this is our answer for problem number 4, a negative 2 plus or minus square root 14 divided by 2. Let's take a look at problem number 5. Number 5, let's get it in standard form. So x squared minus 4x plus 13 equals 0. So our a value, b value, and c value are 1, negative 4, and 13 respectively. Putting it into our equation, x equals a negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. 2 times 1, which is 2. So we're going to multiply a negative 4 times 1 times 13. Negative 4 times 1 times 13 is a negative 52. So x equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 52, all of that divided by 2. So 16 minus 52 is a negative 36. So right here is a negative 36, and so that's underneath the radical. So the square root of a negative 36 is 6i. So x equals 4 plus or minus, the square root of 36 is 6, the square root of negative 1 is I, so we still have our i's in these answers, 6i divided by 2. Once again, our coefficients can all be divided by the same factor, can all be divided by 2. So our answer is x equals 2 plus and minus 3i. 2 plus and minus 3i. Class, what do the graphs of imaginary roots look like? Hopefully you think that they don't cross the x-axis. The roots are imaginary, so they don't cross the x-axis. Here's our x-axis in this case. If you were to put this in your graphing calculator, you would get this graph. It does not cross the x-axis. It stays above it. Number 6, you guys try this one on your own. Let's make sure we put this in descending order, so it's x squared minus 6x plus 13 equals 0. Make sure you put the appropriate terms in the appropriate order, meaning don't put this at the end when you subtract 6x. Put it in descending order, so you're going to put it in the middle. So now your a value is 1, your b value is a negative 6, and your c value is a positive 13. Here we go, last one. X equals a negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. The quicker you can memorize this formula, the better off you're going to be, the more efficiently you can do these problems. A negative 4 times 13 times 1, I guess, is a negative 52. So we get x equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 52 divided by 2. 36 minus 52 is a negative 16. So all of this turns into a negative 16. And the square root of a negative 16 is 4i. Hopefully you did that correctly when you did this one on your own. 6 plus or minus 4i divided by 2. So our answer for this one, when we divide every term by 2, is x equals 3 plus and minus 2i. There's the answer for problem number 6. Hopefully the quadratic formula was easy enough for you. All it is just following that formula and simplifying it correctly. Let me know if you have any questions on that when you get to class.